Paul begins by saying, and now I will show you the most excellent way. And notice the word excellent, the way in which we can most radically go through transformation and grow. I'll show you the most excellent way. Now, he's not going to make an argument. Instead, what he's going to do is he's going to present everything from the framework of a participatory kind of knowing. That's how he begins. So he's not making an argument. He's talking about what his very identity, how his identity is being informed and transformed by its conformity to agapic love. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains but have not love, I am nothing. Notice all the language here. This is participatory language. This is the language of knowing by identifying. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, because Christians are starting to be burnt, right? But I have not love, I gain nothing. Notice this language here. It's very radical. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. Now this, of course, is not romantic love, because romantic love does experience envy and jealousy. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Those are the features you need in order to help and afford someone coming into personhood. Love never fails. Now, we think, what are you talking about? I've been in so many relationships and they fail. That's because you're thinking of this as romantic love. That love does fail. What he means is agape can't fail. We are always born from and always have to give birth to agape, or personhood itself will disappear. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. Now, he's trying to get them to understand, like, what are we talking about here? For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, perfection here meaning completion, the imperfect disappears. And people are like, what? And so he gives a metaphor, one we've seen elsewhere. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Okay, so when you're a kid, you have a particular identity, you have a particular salience landscape, right? And things really, really matter to you in a certain way. When you become an adult, right, your world becomes radically reoriented. What is salient and what is central to you is radically changed. So I hope for many of you as adults, your life is not primarily centered upon and oriented towards the super saliency of candy and toys. If you're, right, really, really oriented towards candies and toys, then of course you're not growing up as an adult. When we go through agape, it is like the change in our salience landscape and our fundamental identity. How we participate in ourselves in the world is fundamentally transformed. And that's what Paul is offering here. Then he says, look, you've got to know what this means. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Okay, so now it's like we're seeing a reflection. We're not in touch with reality. We're like the people in Plato's cave. We're looking at the shadows and the echo. We don't see things as they are. We're not in touch with reality. But with agape, the most excellent way, we will come to know as we are known, right? He's talking about this participatory love. Think about how when you are and now even use a romantic relationship, one with some significant depth. When you really love someone, how you know them to the degree to which they know you. right? It is such a participatory way of knowing. You get to be in touch with their reality in a way that somebody else doesn't. That's part of the bargain of a mature understanding of a romantic relationship, right? You give up the extensive erotic pursuit of many different partners in order that you can deeply know and be known by someone else. And that's like growing up. That's like going from being a child to a man. So Paul is actually talking about there's a way of knowing, gnosis, that is bound up with agape, this way of loving. See, so all these things, God is agape, we forgive agape, we are forgiven by agape, we know as we are known, we are participating in the becoming a person of others, and then they are participating in ours. It's this powerful, whole new way of being. And it has become so sedimented in our culture and so ossified and so below how we live. It's like the ground we're walking on. And like the ground we walk on, we have contempt for it without realizing how much it holds everything up. I'm not a Christian. I'm trying to get you to understand how profound an expression of meaning, transcendence, and way to wisdom is being on offer here. Paul understands this, and he understands this tension between the old Saul that was committed to law and order and justice and punishment, and the new Paul who is participating in the liberation of love. And he's trying to understand, why do I have this inner conflict? He understands his inner conflict as reflecting an inner conflict in God. It's a radical idea. And we need to know this. Not because, again, I'm trying to advocate for Christianity, because we have to understand Paul in order to understand Augustine and in order to understand Luther. And we have to understand Augustine and Luther if we're going to understand the meaning crisis. So you've got this idea that God has two aspects to him or herself. One part is God represents law and justice and order. And insofar as God represents that, we stand in judgment. We have somehow failed. We have not lived up to the moral perfection that morality demands for us. Look, Kant made a point about this. Morality demands nothing less than perfection from you. You have to be completely honest. You have to be completely courageous. And none of us can ever meet that standard. Now, we need to balance that with compassion and love. But what Paul is seeing is he's saying, well, God is perfectly just. And therefore, we fail to meet that standard. And therefore, legally, we are condemned to death. But yet, God isn't just a judge. God is also the agapic parent that loves us. And so what he does is he takes the notion that Jesus' death was somehow sacrificial, because we've talked about how sacrifice is born up within agapic love, and he gives it to this idea that Jesus sacrificed himself in order to satisfy God's demand for justice so that God was capable of freely loving us. And, and how that redemption model works out, there's all kinds of theological battles about it, and whether or not we should understand it this way or that way is not relevant to our purposes. What's relevant, right, is that within this astonishing foundational message of gnosis and agape, there's also an attempt to project on, this sounds so radical, and I don't mean to make it sound ridiculous. I'm not. I'm trying to be respectful. But the idea that somehow the course of reality itself is enmeshed in a conflict between justice and agape. What that's going to mean is that people that experience deep inner conflict are going to find a welcoming home within the auspices of Christianity. Individuals who are riven by a sense of personal failure, of not living up to what they can and should be, that their personhood has been thwarted. They have not come into a fullness, a perfection, as Paul says, a completeness of their personhood, are going to be deeply attracted to the Christian message. And Augustine has this insight. He says, look, pay attention to Plotinus, pay attention to Plato. What are they saying? Plato and Plotinus are ultimately saying we're driven by two powerful loves. We're driven by the love of becoming one within and becoming one with what is most real. Just what's driving all of our reason is love. A love for what's true, a love for what's good, a love for what is beautiful. And then he says, at the heart of reason is love. And what's damaged in me is my capacity to love, not my capacity to reason. So I need something that can heal. Remember the gnosis, the healing. I need to be healed. There's a love that is within reason that can help you grow beyond reason to what reason always sought. How do we grow in love? Well, agape. That's what the Christian message is. Agape, by participating in agape, we grow in love. We grow in the love that is driving us to becoming persons, fully realized persons. Now, we know from current cognitive science, right, that the three components of meaning that people talk about, the things that contribute to meaning in life, and this is Henselman's work and others, are a sense of coherence, a sense of significance, and a sense of purpose. The more coherent, the more intelligible, the more things fit together for you, the more real they are, the more meaningful you find your life. Well, that's the nomological order. How things fit together and make sense in a coherent fashion. What about significance? Significance is this. How valuable, how deep in reality, how good are the elements of your life? That's the normative order. Purpose. Does your life have a direction? Is it moving in a course? That's the narrative order. Human beings want things to make sense. They need a nomological order. And Augustine says, I have this. It's the Aristotelian world order, and I can give a Christian explanation of that. They want things to be significant. They want to satisfy the anagogic drives of inner peace and contact with reality. And Augustine says, I can tell you that because I can tell you how to put reason and agape together. That's what Christianity does. And people want things to have a purpose. They want there to be, right, a story. Christianity is offering the ultimate story. Augustine puts it all together. And he puts it all together as the Roman Empire is literally collapsing. He's in Hippo in North Africa when the barbarians are literally at the gate laying siege to the city. And he's basically laying the foundations for what's going to come next. He's laying foundations for the medieval worldview. But what do we have from this? What we have, right, and we'll come back to the cognitive science, what we have is a very long and powerful history that tells us how our culture has articulated the axial revolution, how it has given a grammar, a way of understanding what the axial revolution has given us. It has given us a system for interpreting and inhabiting a worldview in which meaning and wisdom, as understood by the axial revolution, have been developed and have been articulated in a sophisticated and compelling fashion. Meaning is to have a nomological order that connects us to what is real. It is to have a normative order that connects us, not intellectually, but existentially, to what is good so that we can become better. Meaning is to have a narrative order that tells us how we can move forward through history, both collective and individual history. But what I've tried to show you is that these are not three separate things. They're like the three dimensions, right, of a space, the space of meaning. They're the three axes of the space of meaning. This is a beautiful synthesis. It's the culmination of tremendous amount of historical development. It's profound. And it's not just an intellectual thing. It is, as I've tried to show you, it is simultaneously a scientific thing, a spiritual thing, a therapeutic thing, an existential thing. This is why this is going to last 1,000 years. Because it is such a powerful and enriching vision. Now, you're probably now seeing how this might be relevant to the meaning crisis. Because what happens if, because we are still participating in the waters of Christianity within our culture, even if we're not Christians, and most of us aren't anymore, but how do we tap into all of this? The power of agape, acknowledging its reality, the participatory gnosis, the radical transformation, our own sense of not living up to the fullness of our personhood. What if we still experience all of that, but we do not have the machinery of Christianity with its metaphysics of cosmic redemption available to us? That could be a powerful experience of despair. I mean, Camus famously said, "My whole of my life, I've tried to figure out how can I be a saint without there being a God?" And he, of course, famously came to the conclusion that reality was radically absurd. So there is a price we pay. And this is not a statement of resentment, but there is a price we pay for the gifts, to use a Christian word, the grace, the gifts that Christianity has given us. It has given us expectations of love and transformation and growth into personhood and relief from inner conflict. Expectations that I would say are not well met in our post-Christian worldview. So we carry the grammar of God, but we no longer believe any of the things we say with it, for many of us.